Sick. Millionaire asks young nurse to pose as his wife, but hours later, the unthinkable happens. "Mommy, I want to marry this nurse. She smells like candy." The room went dead silent. The sharp scent of antiseptic hung in the air, mixing awkwardly with the tension. Clara, the young nurse who had just stepped inside with a clipboard and a fresh IV bag, froze mid-step. Her eyes darted from the man in the hospital gown, sitting cross-legged on the bed with crayon markings all over his arms, to the elegantly dressed older woman seated in the corner. Jared, 35 but acting no older than 5, beamed like a child who had just asked for a cookie. His hair was a tousled mess, his cheeks smudged with blue ink, and he was holding a red crayon like a lollipop. He turned his grin to Clara again, raising his eyebrows playfully. "Can I, Mommy? Can I please?" Clara blinked, unsure how to react. She had been told this man was mentally unstable, suffering from a rare form of trauma-induced psychosis following a tragic accident. Everyone in the hospital whispered about him. The rich heir who lost his mind, the harmless lunatic with the brain of a boy. But nothing had prepared her for this kind of welcome. "I'm just here to check his IV," she stammered, avoiding eye contact. The woman in the designer suit slowly stood, walking over with practiced grace. Her smile was polished, but her eyes were cold as glass. "Oh, Jared," she said in a voice too sweet to be sincere, "you always say the silliest things. You do not even know her name, darling." "I do now," Jared chirped, tapping his temple. "Tease Nurse Candy. Or Clara. Clara Candy. Candy Clara." He licked his lips dramatically and giggled, causing Clara to take an instinctive step back. The woman turned to Clara, flashing a dismissive smile. "Do not mind him, dear. My stepson is unique. He likes to joke. A lot." She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "He has good days and bad days. We try to humor him." Jared tilted his head, watching Clara. His grin remained, but something in his eyes, just a flicker, betrayed the performance. For half a second, Clara saw something clear, focused, and hauntingly sane. Her breath caught, but then he blew a raspberry and flopped back onto the bed, arms and legs sprawled like a starfish. "Married, married, married," he chanted, drumming his heels against the mattress. "Good Lord," the stepmother sighed, massaging her temples. "You'll calm down. You may proceed, Nurse Clara." Clara nodded stiffly, walking toward the IV stand, avoiding Jared's gaze. Her fingers fumbled with the bag as her mind raced. She had worked with all kinds of patients before, but this was different. Something felt off. "Do you like me?" Jared whispered suddenly, his voice startlingly close. Clara looked down. He had crept to the edge of the bed, staring up at her with wide eyes. "Because I like you. I like your hair. It's like caramel noodles." "Please, Mr. Jared, stay back," she said firmly, regaining composure. "Let me change the IV." "Will you wear a white dress if we get married?" he asked softly. "Will you dance with me, even if I step on your toes?" Clara tried not to react. She focused on adjusting the drip rate, pretending his words meant nothing. But her heart thudded uncomfortably in her chest. The childish tone was convincing, yet his posture was far too still, too intentional. Something about this man did not sit right. The woman in the corner checked her watch, uninterested. "I have a call. Clara, do finish here and notify the guard when you leave." She turned and exited the room without another glance. Jared watched her go, his expression flat. When the door clicked shut, he leaned back on the bed, sighed dramatically, and said, "That's my lovely mommy. She keeps me safe. From thinking too much." Clara blinked. "Excuse me?" He looked at her again, smile softening. "Thank you for being gentle. Most people poke like angry bees." Clara managed a small nod. She finished her task and turned to leave. "Clara?" Jared's voice was quiet now. She turned her head, expecting more nonsense. "Come back tonight," he said. His eyes locked onto hers. "I will be waiting." His tone sent a chill down her spine. Gone was the childish lilt. For one terrifying moment, Jared sounded completely lucid, measured, serious, and painfully aware. Clara stood frozen. But when she looked again, Jared was rolling around on the bed, mumbling about marshmallows and rainbows. As she walked out the door, she could not shake the echo of his last words. Not the madness, but the message buried beneath. I will be waiting. The hallway was dark and unusually silent, the kind of silence that presses against your skin. Clara walked quietly with a tray in her hands, the soft clink of glass vials the only sound echoing through the dim corridor. It was close to midnight, the hospital in a state of lull. She had received a direct request to administer Jared's medication herself, an unusual order, but she had learned not to question too much in this facility. When she opened the door to Jared's room, her breath caught. He was awake. Not just awake, but kneeling on the floor, completely still, facing the far wall. The overhead light buzzed softly above him, casting eerie shadows across the room. The walls, once clean, were now covered in drawings, dozens of them, all made with crayon, and every single one was of her. Clara stood frozen at the door, eyes scanning the crude, childlike portraits, her face drawn in variations, smiling, crying, looking away. It was obsessive and terrifying. "Jared?" she called cautiously. He did not turn. "They say crayons are for kids," he murmured, voice slow. "But sometimes crayons see more than pens ever will." She stepped forward slowly. "I just need to change your medication." Still no movement. She crouched beside him, reaching for his arm. Suddenly his hand shot out and grabbed hers. She gasped, jerking slightly, but he tightened his grip, not violently, but with shocking firmness. His eyes met hers. Gone was the wide-eyed innocence. Gone was the dazed smile. What stared back at her now was razor-sharp clarity. "Please," he whispered, his voice low, deliberate. "Help me. I am not insane. I need you to help me find the truth." Clara's body went stiff. "What? What are you doing?" "I know what they told you," he continued, still holding her wrist. "That I am broken. That I need to be managed. But none of this is real. Not the act, not the diagnosis." "You're faking?" she whispered, afraid to believe it. His gaze darkened. "I was in a car accident 6 months ago. My stepmother and her son were supposed to be with me. At the last moment they switched cars. Mine crashed. My driver died. I lived, barely." He let go of her hand, but she could not move. "When I woke up in the hospital, people treated me like a child, like I had lost my mind. My mother's lawyer had already arranged for medical guardianship, and when I resisted, things got worse. Medication, isolation, surveillance." Clara stepped back, eyes darting to the door. "If this is a joke, it is not," he said, his tone firm. "Look at me, Clara, really look. Do I seem insane to you right now?" She looked, and she did. For the first time, she saw a man fighting to stay calm, someone battling not with madness but with grief and betrayal. "What do you want from me?" she asked, voice barely audible. Jared's shoulders sagged slightly. "They watch me day and night, but you came in new. You were not part of their game. You are not theirs yet." She blinked. "Yet? They think they can manipulate you," he said bitterly. "Charm you, use you, just like they tried with the last one." "What happened to the last nurse?" Clara asked. "She disappeared," Jared said softly. "Transferred, they said, but she left everything behind. Her books, her plants, her cat." Her mouth went dry. "I need someone I can trust," he said. "Just someone to act normal, to pass information, to help me get out." She hesitated. "Why me?" He smiled faintly. "Because you looked scared today, but you stayed anyway." Clara turned to leave, her thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief and suspicion. But just before she touched the door, his voice stopped her cold. "They want me dead," he said quietly, the madness stripped from his voice completely. "But I need to outlive them, with your help." Her fingers trembled on the doorknob. Behind her, the man pretending to be a boy sat in the shadows, waiting. The next morning, the air inside the manor was thick with tension. Jared had gone back to his childlike demeanor, spinning in circles on the carpeted floor with a blanket over his head like a superhero cape. Clara stood to the side, awkwardly holding a tray of tea, feeling every pair of eyes in the room fixed on her. Jared suddenly froze mid-spin, dropped the blanket dramatically, and pointed at her. "I want her to be my wife," he declared, loud enough to startle the butler. Clara's mouth fell open. She had not been told he would say it again, at least not in public. Jared skipped across the room and threw himself at his stepmother's knees. "Please, Mommy, please! I want to marry Nurse Candy!" Across the room, the older woman's face twitched slightly. "Jared, marriage is not a game. You cannot just pick a girl like a toy." "But I love her hugs," he pouted. "And she sings to me when she thinks I am asleep. I want her forever." Clara flushed. She had only ever hummed once, softly, on a night when he was feverish and restless. The stepmother exchanged a glance with her lawyer, her expression unreadable. "This is absurd," she muttered at first. "He is not capable of making decisions like this." But Jared fell to the ground, pounding his fists like a toddler. "I'll stop eating, I'll scream, I'll break the windows again." The room fell silent. The last time Jared had done that, they had to replace the entire east wing's glass panels. The woman let out a long theatrical sigh. "Fine. If this keeps you calm, we will arrange a small ceremony. No legal paperwork, just symbolic. Understood?" "Yes," Jared whooped, running over to Clara and hugging her tightly. "You smell like wedding cake today." Clara stiffened in his arms, blinking at the woman across the room. The older woman smiled coldly. Later that day, Clara found herself in Jared's room, pacing while he watched her from the bed, eyes clear and unblinking now. "You could have warned me," she hissed. "I needed to make it real," he replied, calmly flipping through a book of floor plans. "She has cameras in the hallways, but not in here. She will believe you are on her side if she thinks you're part of the game." Clara stopped. "Why would she even agree?" "Because she thinks she owns you now," Jared said. "Once you wear the dress, she believes you are hers to command. But she is wrong." That night, preparations were made. Clara was given a simple white dress, nothing grand, more like a nurse's uniform repurposed with lace and soft silk. Jared was dressed in a suit, but his hair remained unkempt, his smile deliberately crooked. The ceremony was held in the manor's small greenhouse with only a few staff and close family. Clara stood beside Jared, her hands cold, her nerves rattling. She had been through intense situations in her life, but never this surreal. The officiant, clearly paid to play along, mumbled the standard lines. "Do you, Jared, take Clara to be your special nurse, wife?" "I do," Jared shouted, bouncing on his heels. "And do you, Clara?" "I do," she cut in quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. Then came the moment that caught everyone off guard. "Would the groom like to say something?" the officiant asked. Jared beamed. "I like her hugs. She gives me cookies, and she smells like cinnamon." Everyone chuckled, even the stepmother, but Clara's heart skipped. Jared had turned toward her, his expression suddenly still. He leaned in close, his lips barely moving. "I will protect you," he murmured under the guise of childlike affection. "No matter how far this goes." She swallowed hard, then he kissed her cheek, innocent enough to look cute, but his hand lingered gently on her arm. That warmth, that steadiness, it was not an act. After the brief ceremony, people dispersed, congratulating Jared like he had won a school prize. Clara walked beside him, head spinning. They were married now, at least in name. But as the sun dipped behind the trees and she caught Jared watching her from the corner of his eye, something inside her shifted. The man pretending to be mad was playing a dangerous game, and now, so was she. The rain tapped gently against the large windows of the library, a steady rhythm that filled the silence between them. Jared stood by the fireplace, staring into the flames, while Clara sat stiffly on the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. They had stolen this quiet hour after dinner, away from the prying eyes and the ever-watchful cameras. For once, the house felt still. "I never told you why," Jared began, voice low, steady. "Why I pretend to be what I am not." Clara looked up, her eyes softening. He no longer wore the mask, no wide, childish grin, no erratic behavior. Just a man, tired, wounded, and still standing. "My father died 8 months after marrying her," he said. "Sudden heart attack," they said, but he was healthy, strong. He ran every morning, ate clean. It never made sense. Clara listened, her chest tightening. 2 weeks before he died, he changed his will, Jared continued. She convinced him to revise everything, said it was to streamline the estate. I saw the papers. She and her son got majority control. I was still executor, but only in name. She made sure I had no real power. He paced slowly, fingers running through his hair. I confronted her. She smiled and said, "You should be grateful. I gave you a future. You just have to know your place." Clara's jaw tightened. "Then came the crash," he said. "We were all supposed to go to a charity gala. Last minute, she said she forgot something and needed to switch cars. She sent me ahead with the driver." He turned to look at her, his eyes hollow. "Brakes failed on a mountain road. The car went over. I was the only survivor." "Oh my God," Clara whispered. "They said it was a miracle I survived. But that night in the hospital, I overheard her on the phone, laughing. She said, 'At least the idiot did not die in vain.' I knew then she wanted me gone." Jared took a deep breath. "So I made a choice. I started playing their game. I acted erratic, confused. I let them label me. Better to be crazy than dead. Better a puppet than a corpse." Clara stared at him, horrified and speechless. "I needed time," he continued. "Time to observe, to find allies, to gather proof. Time to figure out who she was paying, who I could trust. And then you came." She blinked. "Me?" "I did not know if I could trust you either," he admitted. "But you were different. You looked at me like I was still human. Not broken, not beyond saving. And when you stayed, I hoped." Clara looked away, emotions swirling. Her thoughts flashed back to the job offer she had received. Generous pay, light duties, just care and comfort for a high-profile patient. She had been told little about Jared himself, and then it clicked. "She chose me," Clara said aloud, voice tight. "Your stepmother, she picked me." Jared nodded. "She always picks them. Young, smart, but desperate. Alone, easy to manipulate." Clara's heart sank. "She said I would be helping you, that you needed someone patient, that she trusted me. She wanted you to report back to her, to shape me, to monitor every word, every change, like a handler for a wild animal." Clara stood, shaking her head, a sudden fire rising in her chest. "I thought I was here to help you, to heal someone broken. But I was just another pawn." Jared's voice softened. "You were not a pawn, Clara. Not to me." She looked at him then, really looked. The lines of pain on his face, the shadows under his eyes, the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide, and the trust. For a long moment, they stood there in silence. "She used me," Clara said, almost to herself. "She played me like she played you." "She does that," Jared said quietly. "It is what she does best." Clara's hands curled into fists. "Not anymore." Jared raised his brows slightly. "I'm with you now," she said, stepping closer. "Not because you asked, not because of money, but because I know what it feels like to be used, to be lied to, and I won't let her destroy you." He stared at her, a strange flicker in his eyes, hope, perhaps, or something dangerously close to gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply. "I mean it," she added, her voice stronger now. She picked the wrong girl this time. For the first time that night, Jared smiled. Not a smirk, not a performance, a real smile. The night of the garden party arrived under the veil of twilight and polished deception. The estate buzzed with soft music, gentle laughter, and the clinking of expensive glasses. Lanterns lined the stone pathways like glowing eyes in the dark. Guests in designer clothing floated from one manicured corner of the garden to the next, unaware that beneath their feet, a carefully laid trap was about to spring shut. Clara adjusted her dress, a soft ivory number hand-picked by the stepmother herself. She wore a faint, rehearsed smile, playing her role as the doting, slightly clueless wife. Jared, beside her, maintained his childlike facade with convincing precision, nodding enthusiastically at every compliment, playing with a fidget toy that squeaked obnoxiously every few seconds. "You look lovely tonight," someone whispered behind her. Clara turned. It was the stepmother's son Michael, tall, charming, and drunker than he had any right to be so early in the evening. "Does Jared still babble about rainbows and teddy bears?" he chuckled, swirling his drink. "Funny how falling off a cliff turned him into a 5-year-old. Clara forced a laugh, playing along. "Oh, he says the wildest things. Just last night he asked me if unicorns get married." Michael burst into laughter, sloshing his drink. Unbelievable! And to think, all it took was a little push in the right direction. Her smile froze. What do you mean? He leaned in, the alcohol sharpening his tongue. I mean, if someone wanted a shortcut to fortune, getting rid of the heir is a hell of a move. Pity it only half worked, huh? Clara's breath caught, but she kept her face neutral. You say the most outrageous things, he winked, but I always tell the truth, especially after 2 martinis. Behind them, near a line of bushes, Jared sat quietly in a wheelchair, appearing dazed and disinterested. But inside the lining of his jacket, a recording device was tucked against his chest, blinking silently. Earlier that day, they had planned every step. I need him to admit something, Jared had said. Even a whisper, just enough to connect him to the crash. And your mother? Clara had asked. She will never confess. But if she loses control tonight, even a crack in her armor could be enough. And now the cracks were forming. Later, Clara approached the stepmother near the champagne table. The woman sipped her drink gracefully, watching the party with the quiet satisfaction of a queen. Mrs. Harland, Clara said softly, can I ask you something? Of course, dear, she replied without turning. It's about the accident with Jared. I know it must be painful, but I've heard things, rumors. The woman's lips curled. Rumors are for the weak-minded. But wasn't it strange that he was the only one in the car? Clara pressed, feigning innocent concern. That you and Michael switched last minute? The woman's gaze slid toward Clara, icy and sharp. You are asking dangerous questions for someone in a rented dress. Clara lowered her eyes. I'm sorry, I just worry for him. The stepmother leaned closer. Jared was always a complication, a burden. If fate chose to relieve us of that, who are we to question it? Clara's stomach twisted, but she kept her mask in place. A bell rang, signaling dinner. The guests moved toward the long banquet table, laughing and talking. Clara joined Jared near the head of the table, where he sat slouched, playing with a fork. As everyone settled, Jared slowly stood, raising a glass. The room quieted. I want to say something, he said, his tone light and childlike. About my wife. She's amazing. She gives me cookies. Laughter broke out, but Clara watched him closely, his hand moved to his chest. But also, he continued, voice shifting, deepening, I want to say something about my family. The laughter died instantly. About how my father died under suspicious circumstances. About how I was nearly killed in a car with sabotaged brakes. About how my stepmother and her son profited immediately after. Gasps rippled through the table. And about how, Jared said clearly, we recorded this conversation. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the small recorder, placing it on the table. Click. Michael's drunken voice filled the air. Getting rid of the heir is a hell of a move. The garden fell completely silent. The stepmother stood abruptly. This is a joke. Fabricated. He is unstable. There's more, Jared said calmly. Then came her voice, cold and unmistakable. If fate chose to relieve us of that, who are we to question it? The silence snapped. Guests began murmuring. Phones came out. The family lawyer stood, face white. Michael lunged toward Jared, yelling, You set us up! But Clara stepped between them. Touch him, and I swear. Security rushed in, restraining Michael. Someone called the police. The stepmother looked around, realizing her kingdom was collapsing. You think this changes anything? She spat at Jared. He met her gaze, calm and resolute. It already has. The flashing lights of squad cars painted the night red and blue. The storm had passed. In the days that followed the explosive revelation, the Grand Harland estate seemed to exhale for the first time in years. The walls no longer echoed with tension. The staff moved about less cautiously, their whispers replaced with open conversations and quiet laughter. The suffocating weight that had hung over every corridor, every room, had lifted, as though the truth itself had purged the mansion of its secrets. The stepmother, once untouchable in her polished composure, now faced an intense criminal investigation. Her carefully curated social life collapsed, as former allies distanced themselves. Michael, her arrogant, reckless son, had been charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. Overnight, their power turned to dust. The legal team wasted no time. Jared's full authority over the estate was restored. Public sympathy grew in his favor, and headlines began calling him the heir who outsmarted madness. But Jared wanted none of it. No cameras, no interviews, no speeches. He let the lawyers and advisors handle the aftermath, because there was only one thing he truly needed to do. One morning, while the sun had just begun to spill golden light across the dew-kissed fields, Jared knocked on Clara's door. She opened it still in her robe, her hair in soft waves, sleep lingering in her eyes. She blinked at the sight of him, a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair neatly combed, a small basket in one hand, and a look of calm she had never seen on his face before. "Come with me," he said, his voice gentle but sure. No explanations, no questions. She slipped on her shoes and followed. They walked in silence, past the hedges and gravel paths, leaving behind the house that had once imprisoned them both. Jared led her down a narrow trail through an old grove of oak trees that swayed and whispered in the morning breeze. Birds fluttered overhead, and the light filtering through the branches danced across their faces. Finally, they reached a crumbling stone wall, half covered in ivy. Jared pushed open a rusted iron gate, its hinges groaning softly, revealing a hidden garden on the other side. Clara stepped through and gasped softly. It was wild and overgrown, but stunning. A patchwork of wildflowers painted the ground with color, and broken cobblestones peeked out from beneath the grass. Ivy curled around arches that had once held climbing roses, now tangled and rebellious. The garden looked like it had been forgotten by the world, but never by the man beside her. "My father used to bring me here," Jared said, stepping through the brush with a reverence she had never seen. "Before everything changed. Before the lies began." Clara turned slowly, taking it all in. The way the light filtered through the old wisteria, the way time seemed to slow in this space. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "He told me this place was magic," Jared said, sitting on a bench shaded by vines. "Said when the world was too loud, this was where he remembered who he really was, where he taught me how to breathe again." She sat beside him, her heart already swelling. "And now?" she asked softly. Jared looked at her, his expression unreadable at first. Then he spoke. "I faked madness to survive, Clara. I buried myself in lies, in weakness, in fear. But you brought me back to life." She looked down, her cheeks warming, her heart aching in the best way. "You believed me when no one else did," he continued. "You walked into my chaos and chose to stay. You looked at me not as a patient or a threat or a problem, but as a man." Clara reached out, found his hand, and held it. "Because you were worth saving," she said, voice trembling. Jared's breath caught. He stood slowly, setting the basket down at his feet. Then, reaching inside, he pulled out a small velvet box. "I never imagined I'd do this here," he said, turning toward her. "But I cannot think of a place more honest, more real, than this." He dropped to one knee. Clara stared, breathless. "This time," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "There are no lies, no performances, no masks, just me, just us." He looked up, eyes full of sincerity and something deeper, something that said he had found his home in her. "Clara, will you marry me? Truly marry me?" Her heart burst. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, overwhelmed. "Yes, yes, I will." He rose, slipping the ring onto her finger. She threw her arms around him, her face pressed to his chest, holding him like she never wanted to let go. The wind stirred through the garden, carrying the scent of old wisteria and the whispers of a past finally healed. There were no secrets anymore, only love. They left the city quietly, without ceremony or spectacle. No headlines, no press, just a shared decision and a packed car filled with modest belongings, books and hope. Jared and Clara traded the cold marble halls of wealth and whispers for a piece of land where the world moved slower and the stars felt closer. The farmhouse was old but sturdy, surrounded by rolling hills and a winding river that shimmered under the afternoon sun. There were chickens, a creaky porch swing, and the scent of wild lavender carried in on the breeze. It was nothing like the estate Jared had grown up in, and that was exactly why he loved it. Clara opened a small clinic on the property, just 2 rooms and a wide porch that doubled as a waiting area. She treated anyone who came, farmers with sunburns, children with scrapes, elderly folks with stories and old wounds. Payment was optional. Kindness was not. Jared helped build the shelves, paint the walls, and organize medicine cabinets. He handled logistics, filled out forms, answered the phone with a professionalism that made Clara tease him about having a secret degree in office management. For the first time, his days were filled with purpose that had nothing to do with pretending. One morning, Clara caught him laughing, not the forced kind, not the polished performance, but a genuine, boyish laugh that lit up his face. "You're different here," she said as they sat on the porch after sunset, their hands wrapped around mugs of chamomile tea. "I feel different," he replied, glancing out over the field where fireflies blinked like tiny lanterns. "I think I was always waiting for someone to believe in me enough to let me be real." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're more than real, Jared. You're finally free." They had no staff, no guards, no cameras. Just mornings with dew on the grass, afternoons filled with the sounds of birds and Clara's soft voice guiding patients, and nights wrapped in silence, broken only by the wind, rustling through the trees. Weeks turned into months. One late autumn evening, after closing the clinic and feeding the animals, Jared took Clara's hand and led her down a worn path behind the house. The sky was painted in shades of rose and amber, the sun dipping low toward the river. They stopped at the edge of the water, where the surface reflected the sky like a mirror. Jared squeezed her hand gently. "Do you remember," he said, his voice low, "the first thing I ever said to you?" She laughed. "How could I forget? Mommy, I want to marry this nurse." He chuckled. "And now, here we are." She looked at him, eyes shining. "You've come so far." He took a deep breath, watching the sun melt into the horizon. "I used to think survival meant hiding, pretending, being invisible enough to stay alive. But now I know survival means finding someone worth being visible for." Clara turned to him, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "You were always worth seeing," she said. They stood in silence, wrapped in golden light, the world holding its breath. Then Jared looked at her with a familiar twinkle in his eye and asked, "So, still think I'm crazy?" Clara grinned, slipping her arms around his waist. "Crazy enough," she whispered, "to make me believe in love again." As the last light of day faded behind the hills, they stood there, 2 souls who had lost everything and found more than they ever imagined. Each other, and for the first time their story needed no masks, no lies, no disguises. Only truth, only love, only them. And that was the story of Jared and Clara, a tale of deception, resilience, and a love that bloomed where no one expected it to. From the shadows of betrayal to the light of truth, their journey reminds us that sometimes the most broken souls are simply waiting for someone to believe in them. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories, where we bring you the most emotional, heartfelt tales that heal the soul and remind us of the beauty of humanity. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep believing in love, in truth, and in second chances.